Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you all about the debut record from Saul, Rise as Equals, out October 23rd on Spinefarm Records. The album has 14 tracks, 53 minutes in length. This is a very interesting album. The execution on this album is absolutely outstanding. When you look at the quality of the tracks, the construction of the tracks, the overall construction of the album, the musicianship, the soundscape that this record has, everything is at a very high level, putting together a very interesting, robust, dynamic, fluid album from top to bottom. Perhaps the first element of that fluidity is the overall album structure. I really enjoyed the fact that they alternated tracks and they did it in a very good way, giving you different looks, different feels, different sounds at every single turn. When you have an album that has 14 tracks and 53 minutes in length, it's very easy to lose track of the record. You can't see the forest from the trees, and then the album becomes repetitive. You have songs that have similar characteristics coming one after the other, and it becomes a little bit overbearing because of the length and how many tracks are on the record. So they took a look at this album and they decided to do it in a more dynamic and a more creative and definitely in a more fluid way, which is to space out songs that have similar characteristics, bunch up songs that have different appeals, different approaches, different soundscapes, in order for the record to have this constant change from track to track. I wouldn't necessarily call this album a roller coaster ride because I don't feel like the songs change that much from track to track, but you definitely feel like there's elements that are completely morphing from one song to the other. And while one song perhaps is a little bit heavier, a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more driven, the one that comes after becomes a little bit more melancholic. It brings the mood down, it has a different atmosphere all around, and then the track that comes after that offers something completely different from the previous two tracks, and so forth and so forth. So they did a really good job mixing these 14 tracks in the best way possible in order to create a record that really flows from the first to the last song and gives the listener something different at every single turn. Now, having said that, the album is not broken. These 14 tracks don't feel like 14 individual songs that don't belong in this record. Perhaps the overall soundscape of the record is the glue that holds it together. There's a lot of diversity on this album, and that diversity is really spread out across all 14 tracks, but within that diversity you're going to find a lot of common components that are present on every single song, and those small components but important components are really the glue that hold this record together and allow it to be as dynamic, as fluid, and as diverse as it is. When you look deeper into the sound, to me there are two, perhaps three elements that you have to address. You have to look at the guitars and how good, how strong they are, how dynamic, how eclectic, very fluid, heavy, melodic, driven. They almost give you everything they can give you from the most wide spectrum as possible. So I really love how driven this album is from a guitar perspective. Overall sound, the guitars are really the ones pushing the album forward. They're really the ones igniting everything that comes afterwards. And while the drums being a very important element of this record, because I felt that they created a very important backbone, a very important layer, they're not necessarily in the forefront. They're not dominating the album as far as the sound is concerned. That job is really for the guitars. The bass and drums are there to give the record the foundation that it needs, but they're never necessarily taking control on any single track on this album. They can be heavy at times, and there are some songs where you feel the drums have a little bit more of a stronger presence, but even on those tracks, either the vocals or the guitars are really the ones coming into the forefront and dictating where the tracks are going. So this is a very guitar-heavy record from top to bottom. Another element of the sound that I thought was really interesting was the synthesizer, the keyboards, the electronic components that this album has to offer. I was a little bit worried at the beginning of the record on how much they were going to use it and how much importance they were going to give it to them as the album progressed. And I'm happy to say that they kept it as a layer of the record. Really there to do two things: give the album more melody and give the album a better overall atmosphere. So I like the fact that the synthesizer, the keyboards, the electronic elements of this record are not a driving force of the album. Like I said, the guitars are. So those elements are there, but they're there as a layer. They're there in the background. Some songs, they come a little bit more into the forefront, but you need that because of the emotional characteristics of the lyrics. They call for a different atmosphere, and those elements can provide that better atmosphere. So there are some tracks where you get them a little bit more, but overall it's really a layer within the record that adds a lot of atmosphere, adds a lot of melody and presence to the overall soundscape of this record. The vocals are very warm. They provide such a warmth presence to the overall sound experience of this album. They're still diverse. They offer you different things with different songs. Once again, really understanding the dynamic of the track, not just from a musical perspective, but from the lyrical contents perspective, and what kind of vocal tone, what kind of delivery can we use on that song in order to enhance the overall lyrical content and the mood and the atmosphere that the track has. That's exactly the approach they took with every single song on this album. So you're going to see a little bit of a range. You're not going to get one size fits all from the first track to the last track. You're going to get some variations. You're going to get some different looks, some different feels, clean vocals, harsher vocals, electronic driven vocals, a lot of backing vocals and choirs, which I really feel like it adds huge presence, it adds huge volume to the overall songs, but the overall vocal tracks on this record, and I love it. I love the variety that it has, because once again, 14 tracks, 53 minutes, you have to create some variety within the tracks. Otherwise, the album is going to start to sound very repetitive. So from the vocal side of things, they definitely did that, but they didn't go too far outside the box. They just used more of one element in one song and then less of that element in the next song. But they're all present from the beginning all the way to the end, providing some consistency for the overall vocal tracks on this album. Overall, this is an outstanding record. I love the sound. I love how crisp. I love how clean. Really professional. You could hear all the different instruments. You could hear all the different elements. Even with the vocals, when the backing vocals come in, they're not hidden. They're there. You can feel them far away, but you can feel the presence that they add to the track. So the mixing and mastering of this record was just outstanding. They created a very professional sound that really helps the overall presence and the overall delivery that this band had for this record. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I want to start off with Looking to Fight. The vocals are very melodic, almost melancholic in the verses. The matching almost the intensity, or perhaps lack of intensity, that the verses have. So the vocals really come across the same way the music comes across in the verses. They're really one picking up after the other. Then it picks up a lot more power as you move into the chorus. It has more volume, the chorus is a little bit heavier, and the vocals also represent that change. The synth elements, the synthesizer elements, are really important to create an underbelly of melody for this song. Sometimes that melody comes into the forefront, it almost comes in waves, but most of the song, it is hidden within the layers of the track. It perhaps becomes a little bit more noticeable as you get to the end of the song, but the song towards the end becomes a little bit more emotional, and that melody adds to that emotional atmosphere that the overall track has. I love this song, I love how it's put together, and I love how it's delivered. Rise as Equals, which is the title track for this album, one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song on the album. It's a little bit of a heavier track, not overly heavy, but definitely there's a little bit more bite in the overall sound, and definitely on the guitars on this track. It still alternates elements with the more melodic side of the band as well, so you get a little bit both sides, the heavier side and the more melodic side, but the heaviness, when it comes in, it has a little bit of more presence, it has a little bit more strength. But then when the melody comes into the track, it almost strips away that heaviness and allows the melody to just be really robust and really in the forefront. Using some electronic elements with the vocals work well for this track because it works well for the lyrics of the track. Because this is a track that feels a little bit like we're talking about not just the now, but also into the future. So using those electronic elements adds a little bit of a futuristic vibe and how this song sounds and how it comes across. But this is a track that's definitely divided between verses and chorus. Electronic melodic approach in the verses, and then the heavier, more driven approach in the chorus. A chorus that feels like an anthem, a song that comes across as a rock anthem. Last but not least, Sticks and Stones. Harsher vocals. This is one of the heavier songs on the album. Harsher vocals as the song opens, and I thought that perhaps they were going to merge into something else, but the vocals stayed very heavy all the way throughout the song, as the music stays very heavy all the way throughout the song. Adding some backing vocals to this track was important because it added volume. It necessarily made the song heavier because it was already heavy, but it added volume, it added presence. It almost felt like a choir was singing in the background, and I felt that added a lot of life to the overall track, providing this bigger wall of sound and really creating a track that is methodic and heavy and alternates between those two elements as you go from the beginning all the way to the end. But of course, there's very hooky, that's very catchy, and adds something different to the overall heaviness that the track has. Is you're almost merging simplicity with heaviness, and this is the song that you end up with. Alright guys, this is it. This is Saul with Rise as Equals, once again out October 23rd on Spine Farm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.